Reddit, what was the stupidest thing you did as a child? I painted my mother's car with red wall paint. I thought I was doing her a great service. There is still some red paint in my parents' garage today. I once drew a little picture on the armrest of my dad's designated dad armchair to make it pretty and make the experience of sitting in it more pleasant. He yelled at me and made me scrub it off. He's realized his mistake since then and apologized, and we're able to laugh about it now, but man, I was distraught at the time. Bungee cord tug of war. Yeah, the bungee cords with metal hooks on both ends. The first person to let go loses. The person that holds on longer wins. My oldest sister convinced me to help her with a project that was essentially this. I was 4. I lost. I don't know what she expected. I must have been about 9. There was a parachute training center nearby my house, so one day my siblings and I decided to sneak into the grounds and try out the assault course. Part of it was a huge climbing frame with a long rope at the end. 3M maybe. Guess who did a fireman's pole with a rope drop? Yup, had to cycle home with ripped palms. The pain was bad, but the smell from the friction was awful. I can see me doing this as a child. I had a clubhouse in my backyard and we made a booby trap that would drop actual bricks on someone's head if they came inside the door. I don't know what the frick we were thinking. I decided to test it out to see if it would work. It did. I don't know what the frick I was thinking. Pretty sure there's a nice scar on my head that won't be visible until I start balding in my old age. I blame Home Alone. My cousin and I were bored and doing our nails with the really cheap ones you glue on. We really were just playing with the glue and ended up gluing our feet together. It was funny until we couldn't get our big toes apart. Her sister comes in and tries to help, but no amount of lotion, soap, nail polish remover act would get our toes apart. In the end, we just kind of ripped our feet away from each other. Mistake. To this day we argue whether it was worse to have skin ripped from your toe or to have someone else's skin glued to you. My siblings and I colored ourselves in with green felt tip pens and pretended we were Ninja Turtles. Took literally weeks to get rid of the slight greenish hue. OP said stupidest not best. I put on every pair of panties in my drawer all at once. When confronted, I lied until my mom held up the giant wad of interlocking panties she found in the wash basket. When I was 4, we went on a school trip to the fire station. The guy giving us the tour happened to be my best friend's dad. Towards the end of the tour, he got all of us together and told us that if we're ever in trouble and there's a fire, we should always find a phone and dial 999. When I got home, I thought it'd be a great idea to ring 999 whilst my mum was out of the room. The operator asked what the emergency was, and of course I said fire. After realizing that I'd made a terrible mistake, I decided to tell them a knock knock joke in an attempt to ease the tension before my mum came back in the room, and I hung up. Less than 10 minutes later, I hear sirens approaching, getting louder and louder before seeing a familiar red fire engine parked on my drive. Next thing I know, we get a knock at the door, and my mum opens it to find my friend's dad along with 4 or 5 other firemen. Obviously I cried my eyes out over the whole situation, and apologized for wasting their time. For the next year or so, whenever I heard sirens, I'd always ask my mum if it was police, ambulance, fire, as I was convinced if it was police, they'd be coming to arrest me. I used to have slight problems with anal leakage as a young child. I found out later in life that it was due to a pretty severe anal fissure and I had to get surgery to repair it. But since my parents were unaware of this at the time, they were under the impression that I was just not wiping myself. I would get in trouble each time my mom would wash my clothes and see that I had streaks in my underwear. So, I started hiding the worst of them in the walls of my bedroom, and that seemed to be a permanent solution. Fast forward to about 20 years later, my dad now owns the house and we're remodeling it to sell it. And I hear my dad yell what the heck from across the house. I go into my childhood bedroom and he's unearthed roughly 20 pairs of tighty whities that are most eroded and dust ridden. I had forgotten all about this by now, but all the memories come rushing back to me in that moment and I had a good laugh. I painted my windowsill with nail polish. My mom, while she was cleaning it up, asked, "What Did you just sing a freaking song and paint your windowsill for no reason? That's exactly what I did. So when I first started teaching, one of my principals informed me that you can ask a kid why they did something, but they will usually answer I don't know. The truth is, they truly don't know. They had an idea and acted. Kids' brains aren't fully developed obviously, but they can't quite think through all decisions yet. Jumped out of a moving van when I was 7. My mom's friend left me and her daughter alone in the van while she went to go get my brother and her son. She left the keys in the ignition and the daughter decided she wanted to drive. The car starts rolling backwards and I start freaking out because I didn't want to be in a moving car driven by a 6-year-old. I opened the sliding door and jumped out. Thankfully we weren't going very fast and I only got a few cuts and bruises. For some reason I was the only one that got in trouble when the mom came back. The van luckily didn't hit any other cars and ended up in a small ditch. My parents left 3 of us in the car unattended, all around the ages of 5-7 probably. We were in a parking lot, but I can't remember where we were. I decided to jump in the front and play with the car. I put it in reverse, or neutral, and the car started rolling back. Parents came back just in time to stop the car. Luckily we didn't hit anyone. They learned a lesson that day, as did I. So I was around 4-5 years old and there was an outlet across the bedroom, about 5 feet, from my brother and my bunk beds. Well, one day I was attempting to unplug a cord from said outlet and it was stuck. I then thought my 4-5-year-old self that a knife would be the perfect tool to pry out the cord. I then proceeded to stick a knife in the outlet and pry out the plug. It was quite a shocking realization that it was a bad idea. I have a slight memory of my body getting thrusted backwards onto the bottom bunk. Ultimately it blew the fuse, and it blew it so hard the fuse melted. My father was a school teacher and gained so much joy of retelling this story and to show everyone the fuse that had melted. I stuck a fork in an electric outlet as a kid, so at least you're not alone in this. Still kind of scared of electricity. Not me, but my dad. When my father was a child, probably about 5 or 6, he had a favorite shirt. He was obsessed with this thing and wanted to wear it 24/7. My grandmother, being prim and proper, would never let him wear shirts that were not ironed. He eagerly awaited my grandmother ironing his freshly laundered shirt one day. She finished and passed it to him, then turned around to grab something else. My dad was so pumped that his shirt was ready that he reached up, grabbed the iron and gave it a big fat kiss of appreciation. The results were as predictable as you'd expect. Source: my grandma. I was once biking to school and the front mud flap of my bike was slightly bent, so it was scraping against the wheel. Instead of stopping, I tried to correct it during travel by pushing it with my foot. My foot got snagged in the wheel, which promptly stopped rotating and caused me to front flip over the bike. First thing to hit the asphalt were my teeth, 2 of which snapped in half. My brother used to grab random women's butts when he was a toddler. He was learning how to walk and he would go at full speed to an unsuspecting lady and grab her butt with 2 hands. He was an butt man from day one. I've posted this before, but here we go. The year was 1997. I was 6 and in the 1st grade. We just came in from recess for some story time. As we sat on the floor, listening to the story, a thought crossed my mind. What if I take this small playground pebble that was just stuck in someone's shoe and put it in my ear? So I did that. I put it in and took it out twice. When I put it in the 3rd time, it didn't come out. First attempt at removal was the pointy end of my number 2 pencil. I figured I could get good leverage that way. The attempt failed. Second attempt was my mom angrily using tweezers at home after my sister told her I had a rock stuck in my ear, despite my pleas to not tell mom. Third attempt was the emergency room doctors using fancy tweezers after having to strap me to the exam table bed because they were hurting me so badly. This resulted in the rock being further pushed into my ear and causing damage to my eardrum. Fourth attempt was the ear, nose, throat specialist who knew when to stop trying as I resisted from discomfort. He informed my mom I would need to be put out and have my ear stretched to get it out as the rock was too smooth and coated in earwax. He also told us a fun story about a boy my age who put a bean in his nose and it sprouted. The final attempt was the surgery to remove the rock. The nurses asked me what I was going to be for Halloween and we discussed it until the gas knocked me out. I woke up screaming because I was so out of it and confused and did not know where I was. My mother still has the rock. She shakes the little jar at me every now and then. I am 27. My grandfather still calls me Rocky. TLDR. I put a rock in my ear when I was 6 and had to get it surgically removed after several minimally invasive attempts failed and caused damage to my inner ear. I can still hear out of it for now, but I will lose hearing in the ear prematurely. Have a nice one, Rocky. When I was 3 years old, my teddy bear got some dirt on it, so I put it in the dishwasher and ran it. No more teddy bear. I once put a bear near the fire so it would be warm to hold. That didn't go well either. Rubbed carrots in my eyes because my mum said they made your vision better. I'm pretty sure I'm still a disappointment to her. You lied to me. So when I was about 7 I loved Spider-Man. All I ever wanted was spider powers. I knew that it took radioactive spiders to get them and I had learned somewhere that microwaves use radiation, so I went around my backyard collecting spiders and as you might expect, I microwaved them. Obviously they died but I was determined. I quickly slapped the hot spiders onto my wrists. Not my brightest moment. When I was about 5-6, Dad would let me play with the garden house on a hot day, mid-80s, so I could 1. Play outside, 2. Play in the water and cool off, 3. It helped water the yard, and 4. It kept me busy so he could do whatever outside. One day he was letting me play across the yard with the hose where he wanted me to stay and play, as well as water the yard unknowingly to me. He was in the driveway working on the pickup with the hood open. I had seen him spray something on the engine and then go inside the garage, so I figured, hey, maybe it's hot too and I can help since I have the water hose. I came over and put my fingers over the end of the hose to make the water spray further, got the water to land under the hood on the engine, and held it there. I had never seen my dad run so fast, especially towards my direction. I got my butt whooped. Apparently he did a head gasket job and was about to put the valve covers back on. I helped fill the engine with water. This was a 1974 F100, and that was the last time I got to play with the garden hose. Even though I knew what was coming, that still hurt to read. Oh, Lord. When I was about 10 YO, I spread the rumor in school that my parents are badass drug dealers because I thought it was cool. Resulted in a lot of conversations with the headmaster, several teachers and the school psychologist and me washing my dad's car for 6 months. I thought that if I held the blades in the blender and then turned it on I would be able to keep them from spinning. My experiment proved that hypothesis incorrect. When I was 8 I stuck a pencil eraser in my ear because it felt funny. It got stuck and I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid I'd get in trouble. A few months later I failed the hearing screening at school and literally forgot about the eraser wedged deep in my ear canal. Had to see a specialist because of the level of hearing loss and he found the object. A week later I had surgery to have it removed and got to have ice cream afterwards. I still have the eraser in a scrapbook 32 years later. I mean that's cute but also you're nasty. My brother was maybe 3 and was laying this blanket out in the floor perfectly flat. It was so cute. Then he gets on the backrest of the couch and before anyone could stop him, he belly flopped onto the blanket. He started bawling. He thought the blanket would provide enough protection. I'm cracking up writing this. When I was 8 I broke a bowl but was so embarrassed that I broke it that I tried hiding it. I cut myself trying to hide the bowl and came to my parents bloody and crying. One time we were at my grandparents' house and after a while we started wondering where my sister, age 5, was. Turns out she had broken a bowl and was busy hiding the pieces in a wardrobe upstairs. Okay, so as far as I had known, I had never been allergic to kiwis. Cue little me, reaching up into the fruit bowl to get a kiwi, and inhales it. Tastes good, but then suddenly I feel burning, itching and my throat closing up. Only logical thing to do, obviously eat another one, because it didn't hurt as I was eating it. Hospitalized. Same thing happened to me. I had kiwis before. Then one time when I was like 5 I ate a kiwi and my lips swelled up so much they cracked and bled. Haven't had a kiwi since. I really want to eat one again. For reasons that are still a mystery, I went on at length about my grandpa's problems with constipation in a conversation about cute guys in our school. When I was around 7 I woke up early in the morning before anyone else and snuck downstairs with the crazy thought of I wonder what would happen if I put tweezers in a wall socket, so I did. And it started sparking and smoking and I ran back upstairs and got back into bed without telling anyone. Luckily it didn't catch fire and we were all safe. So freaking stupid. Little brother did something similar to this. Breaker tripped and I was able to reset it because the box was in my room. The problem was that the wall he did it on was shredded by my mother's room. Her alarm was plugged into that wall. I got to sneak in and reset her clock and alarm while she was sleeping. It felt like Mission Impossible. Swung on shower rod with soapy hands. Lost grip and flew across bathroom. Got leg stuck in toilet knee deep. 911 was called and fire rescue crews came to smash the toilet. I was famous in the hood. I would not have been able to keep my crap together having to rescue a child knee deep in a freaking toilet. It's nearly 3 AM and the visual has me laughing close to the point of tears or mayo. Tried to get a tan to impress a girl I thought liked me and wound up with a blistered, weeping, 2nd degree sunburn. Most painful thing I've ever experienced. And it turns out she wasn't interested. So, burned twice, haha. I stopped trying to impress women due to stuff like this. I now just hope they come to me. Worked as many times as impressing them did zero. Well, I am white, but my aunt married a black guy who had hair. Just after Space Jam came out, I was 4-5 yo. I would point to black people and call them either Michael Jordan or Uncle. Name. My whole family loves to remind me of the months when they couldn't go in public with me. I live in Detroit. There are a lot of black people here. Walking down the street. Hey, Michael. Hey, Uncle. Name. I had a habit of standing up under tables I was taller than, and not just slowly getting up from a seat under a table, but quickly standing up like I had somewhere to be as a 9-year-old. OMG, I got a concussion when I was like 10 because I was playing manhunt and stood up under a porch I was hiding under. I'm an idiot. My family was at the Orlando airport, and my 5-year-old brother wanted a root beer. I was a bored 12-year-old, so my mom gave me $5 and told me to take him down the hall to a fast food place to buy one. Well, that place didn't have root beer and neither did anywhere else, but I was sure I'd seen a vending machine on the way into the building. My brother and I walked the wrong direction through security. How did no one notice and stop us, and ended up back near the entrance? No vending machine, just the crushing realization of what I'd just done. It was May of 2002 and post 9/11 security was intense and not about to let us through without boarding passes. We only had about 30 minutes until our flight, so I rushed over to the Delta desk and managed to talk to an absolute son of an airline employee who, after learning what had happened and that we had no IDs with us, verified our birthdays and personally walked us over to who I could tell was a very carefully chosen SAR employee who let us back through security and delivered us to our sobbing, frantic parents. No root beer, but we made our flight and my parents were so happy we hadn't been kidnapped that I didn't even get in trouble. Honestly, 12-year-old you might have had a big frick up that day, but he sure handled it like a grown butt man. Props to you. I filled the tub up with water and put one of our fish in it. I thought the fishy would like to swim this new, big tank. I watched it swim around for a long time with a huge smile on my face. Afterwards, I put the fish back in the tank. It died later. I had no idea that fish need to be acclimated to new aquatic environments. And the tub is definitely not the best environment for a fish to live in. I got in a lot of trouble for that. I was 7 years old and I took a crap in the shower because I was worried that my mom would be mad about a wet floor and toilet. Holy crap, I did this too. When I was about the same age, the shower drain cover in my parents' shower came off and the pipe was big enough to accept a turd. Hence I squatted, positioned and started squeezing one out. My mom rounded the corner and stared me in the eyes right as I pinched it off. It was the only time I've ever seen true horror in her eyes. Me and the neighborhood kids used to take a crap on a railroad track and then run like heck when the train came. Great times. Not me, but my uncle. I'm currently staying at my grandparents' place and my grandfather took me for a car ride around the town. He was showing off all these places that were built up in the town over the 60 years he'd been there. We're going around the lake and he stops the car around 400 meters from the edge of the lake and points out towards a random house. He told me about how when my uncle was a kid, maybe 10 or 11, there was this drainage pipe that ran from this one spot where it appeared out of the ground and ran underground towards the lake, and then ran a further 200 or so meters underwater before emerging out in the middle. My grandfather found my uncle and his best friend Tim lying in this drainage pipe just barely holding on while it was lashing rain. The pipe was flowing really strong, and if they let go and fell into the pipe they were guaranteed dead. When he found them, my grandpa just slowly walked up to them and dragged them away by the wrists before giving them both the worst beatings of their lives. Neither of them died, at least. Similar story was told about my grandpa at his funeral. Got sucked through a large culvert as a teenager. My great uncle said they went back and floated something through. Took 4 minutes to get to the other opening. I'm guessing he managed to swim and it took less time. But dang crazy how 50 or so people would never have been born if he didn't luck tough out. Assuming that peeing after pooing will do the cleaning that toilet paper would not recommend. Same. I assumed that the pee washed my butt. Then I mentioned it casually in a conversation with my mom and she was horrified. Innocently commented on the number of African American people in the restaurant. I was probably 4 or 5 and according to those present, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, I gave my observation at a relatively high volume. The restaurant fell silent as all eyes fell on our table. Apparently I said, there sure are a lot of black people here. LOL, that's what you get, parents, when you don't filter your speech in the presence of small children. When I was very young, I hated the doctor's office and the one doctor who gave me shots. So to my mom's horror, I was known to scream, I don't want the black doctor in the waiting room of said office. My doctor was a white man with black hair. Put a .22 rifle bullet in the fire to see what would happen. I still remember the ping of a piece bouncing off the wall near my head. When we were teenagers and my friends were over, I would set a .22 shell on the electric stove burner and turn it on for a fun surprise. No one ever got hurt, but after noticing shrapnel in the cupboard next to the stove I started prying the bullet off first. The cap would still make a nice little bang and it cut down the chance of someone losing an eye. When I was 10 I went to a week of overnight camp with Girl Scouts. One of my tent roommates was outrageously afraid of bugs. She would run, shriek, and generally freak out any time she saw so much as a fly, and I'm not even exaggerating on that. This was kind of a problem at summer camp, but she was a really nice person in general. It was around twilight in the evening. I found a garden snake on the trail on my way back from the latrine, about 20 yards from the tent. Under the idea that, well, she's afraid of bugs, not snakes, I brought it back to the tent to show my other friend. Turns out she was also afraid of snakes. Who would have thought? This poor girl got up, screamed, and ran out of the tent, across the little tent neighborhood we had, and all the way to the counselor's tent. She was still screaming when they came out. My dumbass self decided to run after her and make sure she was okay, still holding the freaking snake, who was probably equally freaked out by this point. The adults ran out of the tent looking pretty panicked, which was reasonable, considering the screaming. They took one look at me standing there like an idiot with a tiny snake, and my roommate shrieking her head off, and immediately yelled at me to go put the animal back. That's how I gave my roommate a panic attack, got chewed out for picking up snakes, woke up the whole campground, and learned not to toe the line with people's phobias. Nicole, if you see this, I'm really sorry. Having an imitation sword fight with my brother using baseball bats, except his was wooden and mine was plastic. I ended up with a broken bat and a broken arm. Good ole Lucille never loses a fight. I must have been about 7 years old, and I was staying with my aunt and uncle on their farm, out in the middle of nowhere in the 80s. There wasn't really much to do to pass the time, so we had to invent games, see where that took us. This fateful day, the game was try to scare the cows in the adjoining field. We tried sneaking up the fence and shouting. We tried pretending to jump over the fence. We even tried a swear word that my sister overheard once. Cows did not give a crap. I took a crack at it. I tried the previously failed pretend to jump the fence tactic, but my twist was to actually jump the fence. What a maverick. Turns out, white kids can't jump and my thighs collided with the barbed wire top line of the fence. the metal barbs hooking into my flesh and securing me. Momentum carried the rest of my body over, but not so much as to free me. I hung there, the little shards of steel slowly dragging along my legs as gravity worked her magic. The good news is, I got to sit in my uncle's comfy chair, which I'd never been allowed to sit on before. It had extendable leg rests, which was super fancy in those days. The bad news is, I still have a bit of a scar on my thigh, a wee white diamond. But, it really not a very impressive scar, so most people don't fully believe the story, even when I prove it. Holy crap. Now. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.